Suppose you're wondering why I've asked you here. As a matter of fact, I'm starting to wonder what I'm doing here.
It's just...
Sure, if I was breathing in and week out, I worry, but I only work at this a few days a week, and besides, my contractor ain't gonna lie to me. Look, with all due respect, my boss wouldn't lie to me.
But I said, sir, do me a favor. Why don't we call an expert? A real expert. I mean, there might be a few things you and I don't know about asbestos.
When people think about the heroes of 9/11, firefighters, police officers, and EMT are usually the first to come to mind. But there is another group of heroes whose efforts often go unnoticed and unappreciated. The thousands of construction workers who helped with the debris cleanup following the event. This video seeks to uncover the untold stories of these workers. Following the initial shock of the event, a plan was put in place for the wreckage to be removed. The NYC Department of Design and Construction was tasked with overseeing this process. The around-the-clock demolition and salvage effort eventually involved hundreds of workers, stretching from Lower Manhattan to sorting and storage areas at Fresh Kills in Staten Island, airplane hangars in JFK Airport, and other sites in New Jersey, where debris was brought by barge and truck. After the removal had already begun, concerns were raised about the safety of the air quality. The EPA wasted little time in assuring New York residents and rescue workers that the area surrounding Ground Zero was safe. On September 13, 2001, just 2 days after the attacks, the agency issued a press release in which it explained, "Sampling of bulk materials and dust found generally low levels of asbestos." A September 18, 2001 press release was even more confident, quoting then EPA Administrator Christine Todd Whitman. "Given the scope of the tragedy from last week, I am glad to reassure the people of New York and Washington, D.C. that their air is safe to breathe and their water is safe to drink." The EPA's September 18, 2001 news release stated that EPA's primary concern is to ensure that rescue workers and the public are not being exposed to elevated levels of potentially hazardous contaminants in the dust and debris. So despite concerns, thousands of workers went back to work following this green light from the EPA. However, the EPA's proclamation of safe air was premature and, as it turned out, wrong. The collapse of the World Trade Center released nearly 2,000 tons of asbestos-3 and hundreds of thousands of tons of concrete in the form of dust. It's possible to make the argument that the EPA was simply unaware of the hazardous health risks. This was not the case. They were aware. Numerous key differences between the draft versions and final versions of EPA statements were found. A recommendation that homes and businesses near Ground Zero be cleaned by professionals was replaced by a request that citizens follow orders from NYC officials. Another statement that showed concerns about sensitive populations was deleted altogether. Language used to describe excessive amounts of asbestos in the area was altered drastically to minimize attention to the dangers it posed. The report cited how samples showed that the asbestos levels were between double and triple the EPA's danger limit, and that the CQ edit defined it as slightly above the limit. The first sign that the EPA had lied can be traced to a 2006 study by Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, which found that 7 out of 10 World Trade Center rescue and wreckage workers had new or worsened lung problems after the attacks. Following this study, other news reports began to suggest that the EPA was not fully forthcoming about the air quality at Ground Zero. EPA scientist Kate Jenkins argues that the agency plainly lied in its public declarations. Jenkins told CBS News in September 2006 that the EPA knew this dust was highly caustic, in some cases as caustic and alkaline as drano. Fast forward over 20 years later. The New York City Department of Health currently has a database of 71,000 people exposed to dust and debris at Ground Zero, a database created in response to hundreds of people's complaints of breathing and lung problems. The health of these individuals may have been saved if not for the government's willingness to place politics above sound science in the aftermath of the 2001 World Trade Center attacks.